Okay, I think I'm ready. Good Friday morning, everyone. My name is Tim. I work at the Urban Ecology Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where we are rounding the corner of the last few weeks of winter. And if you're like me and probably Kim, you're still hoping for at least one, maybe more good winter blasts of snow. I feel like we've really been cheated this year, with apologies to the Bostonites. But we did get a light dust, a couple light dustings of snow, just enough to tease us, but probably not enough to go look for snow fleas, because it's these sunny February and March days that make up the prime snow flea viewing conditions. But regardless of the weather outside or your take on the weather outside, here are some facts to start us out with. We have lots and lots of centipedes living in our houses and in our backyards. And regardless of how you feel about them, I'm here to tell you that centipedes make very good neighbors. They won't hurt you. They won't hurt your pets. And because they are voracious predators, or voracious predators, as our good friend Ethan Bott used to say, a kind of mixture of ferocious and voracious. So as voracious predators, they do a fantastic household service of keeping other household pests from taking over. Unfortunately, many of us just do consider them repulsive, and some of us have a very strong aversion. I have seen them send multiple grown adults on a full sprint, just the sight of them. And there's no judgment in that statement. There's actually fascinating research that looks into how we are genetically hardwired to notice patterns in nature, and particularly in animals, from spiders to snakes. And it makes a lot of sense, because depending on where you live and when you lived, noticing these deadly creatures can save your life. So your brain is not going to always take the time to say, okay, does that snake have red against yellow or red against black? Your brain's probably going to say snake, run, and completely ignore your frontal lobe for some of us. So some of these fears are genetic, some are learned, and everyone's different. So I promise to treat the subject today with grace. And it's a tall order for me to say I'm going to get you to love the wasp or the possum or the spider. And I think that's the case today as well. I'm sure some of you, like me, are completely fascinated by how they move and behave, and others would prefer that they move and behave out of sight. So hopefully in the next half hour, we will all learn something that will at least gain us and the centipedes a bit more respect and wonder and awe. Like, oh, what a cute little centipede, that kind of awe. As always, a huge thank you to past, current, and future subscribers to the Backyard Naturalist. Your support means the world to us. Look for our first subscriber outing to take place in March. And also thank you very much to UEC members. And I'd like to bring your attention to a very popular class coming up this spring on native landscape design, taught by our own often imitated but never duplicated Michaela Rosenthal, who we all got a taste of what to expect last year, as she hosted this Backyard Naturalist 3 times on this subject. And as valuable and appreciated as that was to us, it's nothing like taking the full course from Michaela. So the first session is already sold out, but the second session will run on Thursdays from April 7th through May 19th. So if you're interested, and you should be, hurry and reserve your spot before that one sells out as well. And of course, UEC members receive a 20% discount off the course fees. And for the month of February, the good folks over at Dandy are offering UEC members a 10% discount on in-store purchases. Stationed in a former heating company and garage on Bleat Street, just a hop, skip, and jump from Washington Park, Dandy, which I just found out is a combination of the last names of the owners, Day and Anderson, is a vintage store in the front and an event venue in the back. So it was originally done up for their wedding in 2018. Ryan and Jess have continued working the past 3 years to reveal all that's possible on 50th and Valit. So consider giving them a visit. I had a great time browsing in the store and talking to the very friendly owners. Today is February 11th. And from a human phenology perspective, that means it's in the United States, it's National Inventors Day. In a proclamation put forth by President Reagan, He called upon people of the United States to observe the enormous contribution inventors make to the nation and the world. And it turns out that many countries around the world also celebrate Inventors Day, just on different days from each other. So maybe raise a toast at dinner tonight to the people around the world that invent things. I personally will be thinking of my daughter Cece, who invented a novel way to open up all the kitchen cupboard drawers at the same time with just one piece of string. And oh man, how that has changed my life. February 11th is also Youth Day in Cameroon, and it marks the establishment of UN Women, a United Nations entity working for gender equality and the empowerment of women, advocating for the rights of women and girls and LGBTIQ plus rights. Okay, so on to our featured presentation, the centipede. And one of the many reasons I'm excited about this critter is that it brings us down an entirely new branch of the great tree of life that we have not explored in the almost 2 years that this program has been running. In fact, we have to go all the way back to the largest group of eukaryotic animals, the arthropods, to kind of figure out where they fit. So as a review, arthropods, the word comes from Greek, meaning jointed foot. This is a group of invertebrates with exoskeletons that they must shed to grow. And they are all bilaterally symmetrical. They have segmented bodies with paired jointed appendages. And this refresher on this group is featured in many past episodes, which you can view online, from butterflies to spittlebugs to the aforementioned snow fleas. But to reach the centipedes, from the arthropods, we start heading down a new to us branch called the myriapods. And that name translates as 10,000 feet, or you can just think of it as many feet. So hexapods, like insects, have 6 poda, spiders have 8, crabs have 10, and this group has many. The group itself is so large, you could put a different species on each of those 10,000 feet and still have 3,000 left over. And that's just the species that we have described. There are likely many, many, many more that we haven't. All the members of this group are terrestrial, and the 2 groups that we are most familiar with are the millipedes, or 1,000-foot, and the centipedes, or 100-foot. If we zoom in real close and straight off the top, this is the featured species of centipede, the house centipede. This creature looks amazing and intimidating, as it should. It's a top predator, and this is the basic myriapod body plan, which is hard to do on a moving centipede with all those flailing appendages. But in this photo, you can start to see some of the patterns. So they have 2 antennae, and in this case, they're jutting out from below the eyes, which isn't what we're used to on most arthropods, including insects or space aliens, where the main antenna jut out from the top of the head. So right off the bat, it kind of puts our brain into this uncomfortable spot, because antennae are not supposed to be here. They're supposed to be up here. And in most cases, myriapods have a pair of simple eyes, but that's not the case on our house centipede. They have large, complex eyes. Even though sight isn't their main sensory strength, they're much better at sensing vibrations and chemicals with all those sensitive appendages. The respiratory and circulatory system are very similar to the spiders that we recently featured. They have internal canals, internal spiracles that allow oxygen into the body. Like the spiders, they have long tubular hearts that extend throughout much of the body, and a nervous system that runs primarily along the ventral or the belly side, controlling all those legs and body segments, and leading to a very basic central nervous system, or rudimentary brain. Also, like the spiders, new myriapods are made when males produce an external sperm packet, which you can see right in between these 2 individuals, to present to the female. And again, this is all external. So the process can be very simple. In the most basic form, the male will simply put this sperm packet on the ground and leave, hoping that a female will someday come along to scoop it up. Maybe the least romantic of the myriapods. But on the other end of the spectrum, there are some species, including centipedes, including our house centipedes, where the male does an elaborate courtship dance. And there's a lot of intertwining of appendages before the sperm packet is transferred. And maybe this might change your view of centipedes and myriapods. Some of them exhibit very strong maternal behavior. Many will guard the eggs after they're laid with their life. Sometimes they will guard the hatched babies after they're born. And if you're a baby centipede, you'd feel pretty secure because you have a mama that's not only looking out for you, but is a vicious defender of you as a top predator. So most animals aren't going to want to deal with her to get to you. And in the most extreme cases, after giving birth, a few species, the mama will literally lay down her life and give her body to the babies, let the babies eat them after they're hatched. So the ultimate mama sacrifice in a process called matrophagy, or eating mom. And it's not just in this group. There are other groups of insects and a few other animals that exhibit this behavior. So thank you, Mom. And now for the big reveal. I love the parts of these episodes when we show the baby versions of whatever we're featuring, because, you know, they make our heart melt. So get ready for the baby centipede. And that is just objectively adorable. It doesn't even look real. It's just, I don't know, so cute. And if you're wondering, most baby myriapods are born with just a few sets of legs. In some cases, as few as 3 pairs, just like insects. But then every time they molt that exoskeleton to grow. That's how they grow. They also add an extra pair of legs for every molt in a process called anamorphosis. In some species, they continue to grow segments and legs until they reach a specific growth phase. Often that's adulthood. But in some species, they grow throughout their lives and they can live for years. And that's how you will get hundreds of legs on an individual. Myriapods play a crucial ecological role. Most of them are detritivores, so they break down decaying plant and animal material. Centipedes are the exception to the rule. They're carnivores. Some species of myriapods are bioluminescent, which is super cool. Actually cold, because the light they produced is produced chemically, so no heat, super efficient. If we could figure out how to light our houses this way. As a general rule, this is not a group of animals that you need to worry about. Some millipedes secrete noxious substances, the cyanide-like substances that people say smells like almonds or cherry. If you disturb a millipede, they might release that. For some species, it can be, it can leave a blister, can be a little painful. For some of the larger centipedes, the bite can be excruciatingly painful. But most times it's just regular painful. And, but the thing you really have to worry about is that some people, just like with wasps, it's the allergic reaction to the bites that can be fatal. So fatalities for any member of this group are extremely rare, but not zero. So within this group, the myriapods, there are 4 extant or living classes and then 1 extinct group. And we're going to start with that extinct group because, wow. So the Arthropleuridia, which included this animal, the Arthropleura, is likely the largest arthropod to ever have existed. So it's the blue whale of the arthropod world. And you can see in this rendering of what it would look like next to some humans, and then the fossil rock on the right, which is a big rock. It reached almost 10 feet in length, and it was likely able to grow so large because of a couple of factors. One, the atmosphere at the time, high oxygen, high humidity, and then also when they were crawling around, there really hadn't developed a good terrestrial carnivore system yet, or organisms. So there weren't really a lot of predators that would eat it. But just I mean, if you can imagine the sheer immensity of something, a 10-foot long centipede just moving around the forest floor when you're up for a hike or in your backyard. Part of me really wishes they were still around today. And, this group, not every member of this group was huge. There were some members of this group that were, a centimeter long. So a lot of diversity. Then the next group of myriapods is also among the least well-known, the Poropods, just fun to say. They're teeny tiny critters that live in the soil on all continents, except, you guessed it, Antarctica. They're closely related to millipedes. There are over 700 described species of poropods, and they look like tiny potato bugs, but potato bugs are not related. Potato bugs are crustaceans. They have gills, and this is a land myriapod. Also in the kind of poorly known, but it's cool that they exist department is the Symphylla. This is a much smaller group, both in size and in the number of species. There's only about 200 described species worldwide. They're called the garden centipedes, even though they're not centipedes. They're not even closely related to centipedes. They're non-venomous, and they are in your backyard. They're these just teeny little translucent creatures that are very small and very fast, and they just go about their day decomposing. Then we move to a much more familiar group, the millipedes, and I'm not going to say much about them because there's a lot to say, and they deserve their own time and their own episode, which will happen in the future. But the main distinguishing factors between millipedes and centipedes have to do with what they eat, and then how many legs they appear to have per body segment. So every 2 body segments of a millipede are fused together. And even though each of those body segments has an associated pair of legs, because there's 2 body segments, it looks like each segment has 2 pairs of legs. They're rounder. They kind of come out from the bottom of the body. So slower, rounder, but way more numerous. There are 12,000 described species, and scientists believe that there could easily be 10 times that much, 12,000 described, 12,000 species, 120,000 species. So 12,000 described, 120,000 is one estimate of how many there are. So if you want to discover a species and name it after yourself, you might consider a hobby or a career in studying diplopodology. And the name millipede, again, means 1,000 feet. Maybe it's not the best name because most millipedes have somewhere between 36 and 400 legs, poda, feet. But very recently, just a couple of years ago, scientists discovered the first and only animal on Earth that they found to have more than 1,000 legs, 1,306 legs to be exact, in a new millipede species. Also, the millipedes include the pill millipedes on the lower right. And just like potato bugs, they kind of roll up into a ball for defense. And that's the giant pill millipede here. Most pill millipedes are about the same size as the unrelated potato bugs. So finally, moving on to our invertebrate, the centipedes. Centipedes belong to the class Chilopoda, which translates as lip foot. They have very intricate legs, especially at the tips. As a group, they tend to be fast, carnivorous, and venomous. There are only about 3,300 described species, which is way fewer than the millipedes. That kind of makes sense when you consider the herbivores usually outnumber predators by quite a bit. I think wildebeest versus lions. The smallest known centipede is Hoffman's Dwarf Centipede, which is about 1/2 inch long. And the largest known centipede is the aptly named Peruvian giant yellow-legged centipede, measuring in at over 1 foot in length. Pretty darn large, until you remember that it's 1/10 of the size of that extinct one. But in today's world, that's pretty darn big. So we will take our first video break to look at the amazing giant yellow-legged centipede.
You probably think of centipedes as tiny, squishy, bothersome things cowering in your garden. Meet the South American centipede. About a foot long, in your face, and full of surprises. First surprise, this centipede is still growing, so it's got to shed so a new exoskeleton can grow on its body. Like a debutante wriggling out of a too-tight evening gown, the centipede has to squirm, slink, twitch, writhe, and ooze out of its confinement. Finally, it gets out of its old body armor. Now it has to plump up fast before its epidermis secretes chitin too soon. If the chitin hardens into a shell while the centipede is still on the smallish side, the shedding would have been pointless. Hey, what could be more convenient snacking than that handy old exoskeleton? What do you call this? I mean, it's not cannibalism because that's eating another of your own species. I guess you could call this auto-grazing. The centipede has a new skin and a new attitude. Predator. It's hungry, and eating its old skin just isn't good enough. It's after a baby green iguana. The iguana is fast, twitchy, highly mobile, and impulsive. The centipede is slower, persistent, hungry, and strategic. The centipede advances on the iguana. The iguana retreats. The iguana scoots, the centipede crawls. Scoot, crawl. Scoot, crawl. Whoopsie-daisy. Somehow, after all that scooting, the iguana finds itself at the end of a branch. How'd that happen? Uh-oh. The centipede moves in for the moment of truth. The iguana considers its options and, in a defensive response, leaps into the safety of the water below. Okay, so the centipede wasn't satisfied eating its own skin, and then it failed to nab a more substantial meal. Now what? These baby rats are safe because Mom is guarding the nest. But Mom has to go grocery shopping, leaving the babies completely helpless. Speaking of grocery shopping, the centipede relies on ground vibrations and antennae touch to locate a feast like this one. Mom senses danger and races to the rescue. The centipede is chased off, but not before Mom discovers one of her babies dead, killed by the centipede. Now, wait a minute. We don't want you to think that centipedes are venom-spewing, hundred-legged baby killers. I mean, the females can be devoted moms. I dare any predator to try and get at these eggs. This mom is literally a basket case, protecting her eggs until they hatch, and a new generation of fierce, multi-limbed warriors are unleashed on the jungle.
Sorry, I should have given a warning that we did lose a baby rat in there. But it was really interesting when you saw because most centipedes do not use visual cues when they're hunting, you know, it was really easy for that centipede to get close to the lizard. But then when it was really close, it you know, if it were a visual predator, striking probably would have been easier, but it was relying on those other senses. And that gave the lizard time to kind of scoot away. So
Hey, Tim, there's a question of how long before a new shell or how long before it molts again. Do you know the time period?
I don't. It's species specific from what I understand. So it's not like once a year, like you get in birds or other creatures. So it can be relatively quick and relatively, you know, it depends on the species, and I don't know the exact numbers. But if you consider that it's an excellent question. If you consider that most centipedes are longer living, most myriapods are longer living. And let's say they live 5, 6, 7 years and they have to grow, you know, hundreds of legs, you can kind of do the math that they're shedding pretty frequently. Because each individual shed only grows one more appendage, or one more set of appendages and one more compartment. But you know, it's efficient too, because again, after it sheds, it's not like it's wasting that. It will, just like a lot of arthropods, it'll eat that shed skin. So it's tight recycling, but you'd have to imagine, and I don't know this for sure, you'd have to imagine that some of those really big species are shedding pretty regularly. Okay, so the giant yellow leg centipede and some of the other larger centipedes, as you saw, can catch some pretty formidable prey. So lizards, frogs, birds, mice, other rodents, rats, spiders, and then as the next short video shows, a prey item that was a bit surprising, and because I needed to make sure that David Attenborough's...
You probably think of
That's the
centipedes
wrong
as
one, sorry. Here we go. I had to make sure that David Attenborough made an appearance.
This centipede has powerful jaws, poison fangs, and is very, very fast. It's a very good hunter. But it's only half as long as my little finger. There are centipedes in the world, however, that are as big as my forearm. This is one of these alarming giants. It's over 13 inches, 35 centimeters long, and with the muscular strength of a small snake. And the poison in its black-tipped fangs is lethal. It hunts in the dark, bat-haunted caves of Venezuela. Like the whip spider and the velvet worm, it uses its antennae to feel for its victims. The beetles that swarm on the rocky floor of the cave are of no interest to it. It's after bigger prey. And it knows it can find that by climbing. Its many legs give it a secure hold on the vertical rocks. It's heading for the ceiling. Now in the darkness, it can sense bats flying past it. Holding on with its hind legs, it reaches out into their flight path, and almost immediately, it has one. An injection of venom from its fangs kills the bat almost instantaneously. It will take it an hour or so, but it will eat all the bat's flesh.
I mean, my question is like, where does it put all that stuff? It eats so quickly. I mean, and there's so much of it, so I don't know. It surprises me. But it was surprising to nobody that nobody has ever discovered. I should say it was surprising to me that nobody has ever discovered a centipede yet that has exactly 100 legs. But that makes sense when you learn that they always have an odd number of pairs of legs. So ranges from 30 to 354, but you can never get 100 because that would be 50 pairs of legs, and that's an even number. So unless you come across a 102-legged centipede that loses a couple of legs, and they can lose legs and be okay. And sometimes even when they lose the legs as a defense mechanism, the leg will continue to move to kind of distract the predator. But unless you get a 102-legged centipede that loses a couple of legs, you're never going to find a 100-legged centipede. But centipedes describe centipedes better than millipedes describe millipedes, because the number of legs is often in the hundreds, while it's only their one species of millipede that has more than 1,000 legs. One thing that limits where centipedes can live, at least on a micro scale, is that they require a moist habitat. So unlike insects and spiders that can handle a lot of dry microclimate, centipedes are prone to drying out, which is why we usually find them in our bathrooms, our basements, our garages, and then for the outside centipedes, underground or under wood piles. So as we finish the tour of the centipede world, there are a few surprises, like this beautiful, just almost hard to believe it exists, feather-tailed centipede. It looks like it's got two paddles back there. And when this species is threatened, it will shake those back feather legs to make a hissing sound. So it's the centipede version of the rattlesnake rattle, saying, don't mess with me. And, you know, a lot of these more dangerous centipedes do have this bright coloring, which is that aposematic pattern you see often. Here's the equally stunning blue ring centipede found in Nigeria. Another giant found only on the Galapagos, known as Darwin's Goliath centipede. So this had just caught a mouse for a meal. And since I said Galapagos, I do want to let you know that we are planning a trip there in 2023. So stay tuned for that. Here is the aquatic centipede. It's the only known amphibious centipede to date. It's found in Southeast Asia, but even this, the most aquatic of all centipedes, still spends most of its time on land. It's just more comfortable in the water. There is no truly aquatic centipede, which makes sense since they don't have gills, they have lungs. At least there's not one out there that we know of yet. Anyway, a truly aquatic centipede. Here's the beautiful red-headed centipede of South Africa, also Australia and parts of Southeast Asia. Here's the Vietnamese centipede, which just to me looks plastic. Looks like you could get it out of kit and put it together, like that game where you put together the centipede. Anyway, if you're starting to feel that left out because all these really big centipedes seem to live elsewhere, there are some really big ones here in the US. This is the giant desert centipede found in mainly the Sonoran Desert in Southwest US. And then the common desert centipede also from the Southwestern US. But for all the beauty you find in these larger centipedes, these larger dangerous centipedes, if you take a really close look and if you can stomach it, I think that our centipede, the house centipede, the centipede that right now is hanging out with you all, maybe taking a peek at your screen, is one of the most visually stunning of all the centipedes. And this will be the focus of the remainder of the morning. Quickly, the two common non-house centipedes that you will find outside your house include the stone centipede. So these are the ones you'll probably see these if you lift up a log or lift up a piece of wood or a stone, and they're kind of crawling at the surface of the soil, but underneath things in moist, damp habitats. So those are the stone centipedes, and then there's also the soil centipedes that you find if you're digging in the soil and you just see these little tiny centipedes moving through the soil. So they live in the soil. They don't have eyes, and they're a little slower for a centipede, and they rely almost solely on touch and chemicals, but they're all predators. So our house centipede belongs to a group that is called the house centipedes. And they're some of the fastest invertebrates anywhere in the world. They're the only centipedes that have these compound eyes and these really long, multi-segmented, very sensitive appendages, the legs, the antenna. So what do we know about our house centipede? They usually have 15 pairs of legs, but when you see them running around, it sure looks like they have a lot more to me. They're kind of at a wide view, they're kind of plain looking with the yellowish gray color, but when you get closer, you really see this cool, intricate pattern of banded stripes on the body and then on the legs too. So if you're brave enough to get or lucky enough to get a closer look, it probably comes as no surprise to you that like many of the critters we feature here, the house centipede is not native to this area. It's naturally found around the Mediterranean Sea, but like many other critters, it's spread around the world, and it thrives in houses and other human-made buildings. Its primary food source is other arthropods, mainly insects and spiders, and whatever else it can find around your home. So the name Studagera, the genus, derives from the bearer of shields because of the shield-shaped plates you can see in some of the more zoomed-in pictures that are on its back. And then Coleoptrata comes from an observation by Linnaeus that he thought the thorax looked very Coleoptera-like, and Coleoptera again is beetles. So the translation of the Latin name here means resembling a beetle and bearing shields. They use those long, delicate legs to reach a top speed of 16 inches per second across floors, up walls, and along ceilings. So that doesn't sound like a lot when you translate it to miles per hour, because it's essentially 1 mile per hour. But if you take the pound for pound equivalent, that would be like a human running at 42 miles an hour. And currently the fastest human we know of has been clocked at 27.5 miles an hour. So centipedes can book it. They can move. As I mentioned, they're one of the fastest terrestrial arthropods out there. The hind legs, and you can see that would be the upper left portion of this, they resemble the antenna, and that's part defense mechanism. So if something would try to eat it, or if it were trying to eat something, the other animal wouldn't essentially know which end is the head and which is the tail, which is the dangerous end and which is the not dangerous end. They lay their eggs in the spring, and the babies have only 4 pairs of legs when they hatch. They can live up to 7 years in the right environment, and they don't start breeding until they're 3 years old, which is pretty old for an arthropod to start breeding. A lot of them start breeding pretty soon after they hatch. Courtship, this is one of the more delicate, intricate courtships. So the male and females will circle around each other, gently touching their antennae together, and then the male puts the sperm packet on the ground and the female scoops it up to fertilize her eggs. So I included this slide just because it's another vantage point that really just shows those intricate patterns when you look at it, which I find stunning and beautiful. But if you don't find the centipede beautiful, you may want to consider all of the things that centipedes love to eat. And if you don't want these in your house, you might want to thank the centipedes, who are very efficient predators of these, particularly cockroach eggs. I know we don't have as much of a cockroach issue here in the northern part of the US, but for those in other parts of the country, they really do have a preference for cockroach eggs. So they're super efficient predators. They're also good at taking out bed bugs and ants and termites and a lot of things that you don't want in your house. They do attack spiders, and I do want spiders in my house, but I guess that's the price you pay. In this shot, which I suppose only a mother centipede could love, you can see that the compound eyes, which is unique to centipedes, and they don't have true fangs. So their actual mouth parts are pretty non-imposing and weak. But what they did instead is their front pairs of legs have evolved into these powerful venom-injecting appendages, which again, for some centipedes can deliver a really nasty sting. But for our house centipede, really the only way they could possibly bite you is if you tried to handle them. And even then, they probably would have difficulty penetrating your skin. And even then, if it pinches, that might be the worst, or you might get a mild allergic local reaction. So if you're worried about the house centipedes, don't be. Just don't try to pick them up. They're not going to harm you. When you see them, they're just trying to get the heck away from you. And so we will wrap up the day with one of the truly amazing centipede stories of how they catch and kill their prey. And this is where having all those legs really comes in handy, because they use the different legs for different purposes. It's like a Swiss Army knife. So some legs are used to lasso in and subdue prey. Some are used as turbo thrusters for speed. Some, as I mentioned, function as antenna and fangs. And so you can consider all of this as we watch our last video of the day on the house centipede.
You can now support Deep Look on Patreon. Details after the show. Ever get that creepy, crawly feeling when you're in the garage at night? that phantom tickle on the back of your neck? Well, there is something out there, waiting in the dark. The house centipede. It's voracious, venomous, and the fastest centipede there is. But don't worry, it wouldn't hurt a fly. Oh, not quite true. Ugh. Okay, so let's clear something up right now. Despite their name, centipedes almost never have 100 legs. Most have fewer than 60. And the tiny monster in your garage starts out with only 8. Until it grows, sheds its exoskeleton, and sprouts more legs. Then it sheds again, and again, and again, and again, and again, until it finally gets to 30. All those legs work together in a rippling, rolling motion called a metachronal wave. It's kind of the same way a worm gets around, but the centipede is way, way faster. Propelled by these extra long, supercharged legs in the back. Think of it as a well-synchronized crew boat skimming over the water with the strongest rowers in the rear and the ones in front keeping things steady. A set of stiff plates running down the centipede's back, called tergites, keep the segments underneath, called sternites, from rocking side to side. But the house centipede still has legs to spare, and it's found some novel ways to put them to work. Those extra long ones at the very end sort of look like antennae, don't they? That's the idea. It's called automimicry, when one part of the animal looks like another part, usually to fool predators or prey. That's what people always thought, but when scientists in Germany took a closer look at those legs, they found as many sensory hairs on them as on the antennae. So these faux antennae aren't just dummies, they actually work. And see those fangs up front? Those are its forciples. In some early ancestor, they used to be legs too. They clamp down and inject the venom, but house centipedes rarely bite people. Those forciples are also a great grooming tool. Oh, and the tip of each centipede leg is another kind of tool. One so super segmented that it's almost like a rope. The centipede uses them as a lasso to keep its prey from escaping. Not even this cricket, with its powerful kick, can loosen the grip. So Twinkle Toes here is kind of a creepy Swiss Army knife. You might say it's got a few legs up on the competition. Okay, bad pun, I know. Centipedes are really methodical groomers, kind of like cats. They start with the front legs and work their way to the back. Join our Deep Look community on Patreon. Click the button or link below to get rewards like exclusive digital downloads, chats with the producers, and cool swag. Oh, and one more thing. Our partner PBS Digital Studios wants to hear from you. It's a survey, so we can make even better shows. It takes about 10 minutes, and you might win a sweet t-shirt. Link is in the description. Thanks.
All right. So as we wrap up the morning, and usually this starts again. Okay, there we go. I don't know, take one last look at how beautiful the house centipede is. They're super useful to your home. Unfortunately for them, they're just a creature that's hard for us to empathize with. They don't follow the typical body pattern of most animals. These awkward, angled, moving legs kind of throw our brain into a panic. They're not something you'd want to cuddle, and likely that's why some people hate them and kill them on sight. But my PSA for today is don't do it. If you come across one, leave, look away, shoo it. It'll get out. Maybe if it's stuck in your bathtub or your sink, flick it out. But if you can, I love to look at them just to get a glimpse I can before they're gone. of that intricate beauty, the coordinated legs as they scoot across the floor at blinding speeds before disappearing in a crack or under a door or behind the shower curtain. And when that happens, you can just rest easy knowing that the centipedes are on the clock, patrolling your house and keeping potential pests at bay. So thank you for joining me today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.